This time, no, we're jumping from BioWare Edmonton, where they make Mass Effect and Dragon Age 3, to BioWare Austin, home of the Old Republic. Yes, we have another Old Republic guest with us today. His name is Shawn Mckeever. He is one of the head writers, mainly for Imperial stuff, such as Imperial Agent. He also has written with DC and Marvel, IDW, and much more. He joined the BioWare team just before Rise of the Hutt Cartel was announced, and he is with us today. But before we get to him, we're going to have some slight announcements, because after we recorded this interview, there was an announcement made about the Revan expansion, which, of course, he can't talk about because there are certain people in BioWare that have to talk about expansions and new information. But the Revan expansion, which is coming up soon, it's 3.0 for the Old Republic. It was supposed to be announced this month, but this month being September, but it wasn't. Eric Musco, one of the community managers, said that there's too many moving parts, and so they weren't able to get the announcement done. Of course, you've seen the trailer, which Deadly Force Returns teaser, which shows Revan, but they said the expansion will still be released on schedule. They're just delaying the announcement. Is that sad for you, Bruce? Yeah, you're sad you won't get to see more Revan. But we did get to see some Revan in the game. Those of you who have played the Old Republic know that you do get to see Revan and the Exile in the Old Republic in some really kind of awesome ways. But this new expansion, which looks like it'll be telling more of Revan's story, probably what he was doing with the Emperor and so on, is still set to be released soon. But the announcement with the specifics, well, is delayed a little bit. But as Eric says, it'll only be delayed a couple of weeks at the most. So that's definitely exciting for Star Wars fans. Of course, other Star Wars news, Star Wars Rebels has premiered. It was came out on the 26th on Disney XD, before the last episode came out. Yeah, Bruce and I were supposed to go see it in theaters, but we had some complications and that was not possible. But it does come out on Disney Channel this week. Did you hear that, Bruce? Yeah, Bruce. This week, Disney Channel, October 3rd. It'll be available and you guys can watch it. It's also going to be available on DVD at Walmart. Bruce, do you think we can get it at Walmart? I take it from you now, Silence, Bruce, that you're excited for us to get it on DVD. Yes, Star Wars Rebels has come out too. Well, I'd say better buzz than when Clone Wars came out thus far. I've seen things about animation, some people not liking the hair, but to be fair, folks, even with tons of money, hair is really hard to animate. Extremely hard to animate. But if you guys are liking Rebels, and some of you I've seen have had questions about certain characters, go read the book New Dawn by John Jackson Miller. It explains a lot of the stuff that you might have questions about certain characters, especially Kanan and Hera. So go check it out, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about Star Wars Rebels on the main page, or of course the Old Republic. This is an Old Republic episode. We've had episodes dating back to when Hal Hood became head writer back in 2012. And when he made that announcement on the show. So there's lots of great stuff in the Old Republic here on the show, and I know you guys are definitely going to be looking forward to more episodes. But yeah, this is Shawn Mckeever. He, comic book writer, now a head writer for the Old Republic, focusing on the Imperial stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. I enjoyed this interview, but of course I'm a fan of the Old Republic and a comic book nerd. So let's see what you guys think. Shawn Mckeever. So we have with us today a writer from the DC Universe, the Marvel Universe, IDW books, and Star Wars. We have with us Shawn Mckeever. Was that pronounced correctly, Mckeever?
Yep, that's it.
Excellent. So we have lots of questions from listeners and lots of interesting things to talk about. So I guess the first thing that people would like to know is, how is someone who is known for writing in Marvel and DC and basically everywhere comics come out of, how did you get involved in BioWare's The Old Republic?
That's actually a pretty good question. I had been writing comics for a long time. I started freelancing in comics in the 90s. Back through all those years, as I was writing comic books and writing Spider-Man and Teen Titans and all that kind of stuff, I was freelancing, so I'd spend a good amount of time playing video games on the side, and one of my favorite companies to play their games was BioWare, and I really loved their attention to story. They were obviously a very story-first sort of company, I loved Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights and Knights of the Old Republic. And I'd always been kind of interested in writing for video games. So a couple of years ago, I kind of decided that I needed something new in my life, and video games might be that thing. And so I got in touch with BioWare. Actually, interestingly enough, I got in touch with BioWare because back in 2009, I was in San Diego Comic-Con, and one night I was just kind of hanging out on my own and just completely by accident, met this guy, and we started talking about, we're both from Wisconsin, it turned out, and we started talking about Wisconsin and this and that and the other, and it turned out that that was Jeff Dobson, who was art director for BioWare Austin. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I got in touch with him, and it turned out that they were looking for writers actively for SWTOR. So I started the audition process, and that was pretty interesting for me because, I've been writing comics, like I said, for a long time, and I've written a lot of high-profile characters and titles. So I'm pretty well established as a writer, but that's not enough at BioWare, and they want to make sure that you can write a BioWare-type game with branching dialogue and everything that comes with that. And so I went through a lengthy audition process while they were also working on launching the game. So that went, from late 2011 into 2012 when I was finally hired, and they brought me in, and I've been here ever since.
So how does this audition process work? Is it like you basically they say write a scene and you write a scene, or how do they audition writers for a game like that?
Well, yeah, they had me. They actually had me pick up. I had to get Neverwinter Nights again, but it was available fairly inexpensively at this point, and I used the Aurora editing tool to write my own dialogue and basically create a quest for them. And so I sent that quest file into them, and that's how I did my initial audition. And then they sent back a lot of notes and had me rewrite it to their specifications, and I did that, and that's how that worked out.
So recently, a friend of mine and I, he writes comic scripts and so on, we're writing like a radio drama script, and he was saying how much harder it is to go from comics to screenplay script format. Did you find it difficult writing for panels versus, changing from panels to an actual script?
Sure. I'd only had previously one experience where I was writing for something that was going to be voiced. I wrote an episode of the Iron Man Armored Adventures series for Nickelodeon. And what I quickly found with that and with SWTOR is that a lot of things sound good in your head, but until you actually say them out loud, you don't realize, how long those sentences are or how awkward they are, until you actually try to voice it yourself. And so, that's something I learned pretty quickly, and that I keep trying to refine and perfect. And, even today I was doing some writing and editing the lines down further and further so that they're more like something someone would actually say, because somebody's going to actually have to say it is an important thing.
I know pretty much all of you are huge fans of Star Wars, and I know Hal Hood mentioned how sometimes he'd have to edit his scripts down because he'd be too excited and want to put too much Star Wars jargon in his scripts right off the bat, and it would turn out to be a confusing mess. Have you ever had an issue where you liked something so much your enthusiasm made your script worse for it? I
haven't had quite that level yet. I mean, I would say that more of my issue is that I really, like, my writing is very character driven, and I really want to explore the characters so much that I want to have these really, really long conversations that really delve into the character and allow the player to have, all kinds of different nesting and branched responses, and it just, it can just stop a story cold, the pacing has to remain brisk on these things. I love the Star Wars lore. I grew up on the Star Wars movies. You know, I saw Star Wars, or as they call it now, A New Hope. You know, back when it was in theaters, and you know, had a great love for that movie. And so, you know, getting to work in that stuff now, the lore is a wonderful part of it. But you know, I one of the things I learned in working for Marvel and DC is that it's a tool in the tool belt. It's, you know, it's not the entirety of the story, you know. So I always have tried to bring out just as much information as is necessary for the story, and not try to get too bogged down into lore, even though I find it interesting. You know, and the same with Marvel, where I, you know, practically memorized their handbook entries, you know, for all the characters. I just find that kind of middle ground where you bring that in as if somebody was reading this stuff or experiencing this stuff for the first time, so that it isn't too confusing for them and they get the gist of it, and it isn't too overwhelming.
So just so the listeners know, you mentioned before how you joined the Old Republic right around when they're preparing for launch, and right when they launched. So, you know, we know your writing wasn't really in the initial release. Are there flashpoints where your actual writing stamp is on? I know you helped with the Rise of the Hutt Cartel. For people kind of examples of your writing, where does your writing mainly feature in the game?
Sure. My first work for the game was actually, like you said, in Rise of the Hutt Cartel. I wrote the Macro Binoculars quest chain with the Shroud. So that was like my first big quest chain. Since then, you can find a lot of my flourishes in the Bounty Brokers Association event and the Rakghoul Resurgence event, and then also in the Forged Alliances flashpoints on the Imperial side.
So that's your writing.
That's me. Yeah, I'm writing a lot of the. I've been writing a lot of the Imperial stuff.
Okay. One of the listeners really wants to know is, what's your favorite aspect of Star Wars to study up on, to read up on? Would it be Imperials then, or is that just where you happen to write?
You know, this is kind of like a picking your favorite child kind of answer, and I don't mean it to be, but like I like all of it. A few weeks ago, I was, or a couple months ago now, I guess. Gosh, time flies. I was writing crew skill missions for the next expansion, and you know, I was on Wikipedia and I was just hitting random just to find planets or inspiration and, you know, various bits of lore, and I'd find myself just going down that rabbit hole of lore and just getting lost in it. And it's, you know, it's such a huge universe, and there's so much variety within it. And that's what I love about it. Obviously, I love a lot of the stuff that's connected to the original trilogy, you know, as I'm sure is the same for a lot of people. But, you know, I think there's also a lot that's really fascinating in the KOTOR era and from before that as well. You know, back in the 90s when Dark Horse started putting out the comics, and they obviously a lot of it started out post trilogy. But they also started the Tales of the Jedi and went way back. And I find all that stuff that happened, you know, tens of thousands of years ago very fascinating as well, because it informs what we're writing for the Tor era.
So have you ever found something really small and random on Wikipedia and you said, I just have to include this in my writing?
Oh, man. You know, I'm sure that I have, and I'm sure that sometimes I mean it as like a joke, and then sometimes I'm serious. But yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head. But sometimes there's something that does stand out. You know, and sometimes that's because, like, I think you'll find fans who are real passionate about certain things, and so the article winds up being pretty lengthy for like what might be a minor element, and that's the stuff that I find really fascinating. That somebody, found that passion, and you kind of want to, you're kind of inspired by that to do something about it. But I don't have any exact examples off the top of my head, but I bet you there's stuff in the game that relates to all that. One thing I've kept wanting to use is Fez Burba from our game, but I've not yet had the opportunity. One day.
So, speaking of fanatical fans, since you write for Star Wars, you're pretty much on the pulse of what people talk about. And, since Disney, there's been all the EU reboot and the Dark Horse stuff. People have been yelling at any writer who writes now in Star Wars about, canon and all that nonsense. What's it like writing in the bubble that is the Old Republic, which is, a game that exists and it's pretty much its own universe because it's so far back, it doesn't really... It's not really affected by lots of things that happen around it in the rest of the Star Wars universe. What's it like having that kind of security bubble, saying I'm 3,000 years before everything else, so I'm pretty safe right now?
Well, that's pretty much it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I get to write in an era that, I think there's a lot of established lore around it already, just, from the KOTOR games, from the novels, and from comics. But we do have a bit of carte blanche because of the era that we're in. There's a lot that we can do. The important thing to me, is even though we can do a lot of wild and crazy stuff, it's always got to feel like Star Wars to me. The things that I loved about Star Wars have to be somewhere present in the story. The downside, I think, is that because our story takes place in the past, there are obviously certain things that we can't do, and we're kind of shoehorned in that way. But I think in any kind of fictional universe, that's always going to be the case. It was the same thing for me writing for Marvel Comics. I would be able to write stuff that was off to the side and have a lot of freedom, but at the same time, there were other writers writing other things, and I couldn't conflict with the things that they were doing. So it's similar to that in that we're all part of one larger tapestry, and we have to be respectful of that. But that said, I mean, we do get a lot of freedom, and it's a lot of fun.
What would you say is the most challenging part of writing in Star Wars?
The most challenging part of writing in Star Wars specifically, honestly, for me, it's being. I have a tendency to want to be too on the nose in being nostalgic with Star Wars stuff and doing little lines and bits that are very, very obvious nods to like the original trilogy. So I try not to do that too much. Every once in a while, I sneak one in, but that's honestly the biggest hurdle. I don't find, I think that I'm able to write characters that I think are interesting, and in an environment where virtually anything can happen. So I don't find it terribly limiting.
So this is a question from a listener. He says most people see the Jedi Knight storyline as, say, the official through line through the story of what happens as a continuation from KOTOR 1 and 2. Which of the storylines do you see as your favorite continuation of KOTOR 1 and 2, since that's what TOR is? Well, I would say as a continuation of KOTOR, I mean, I would have to agree that the Jedi Knight is that would be my favorite because it really is the most like a direct sequel. But even though all of them have very interesting elements that tie in to all that, definitely the Knight. And then his second part is, so beyond following KOTOR 1 and 2, which, as a gamer or a fan, is your favorite storyline to experience? Well, my main is a Sith Warrior, Marauder, and that's definitely my favorite of all the classes. I'm also playing through I've kind of sort of played through all of the classes. Back when I started, I basically did a lot of fast forward
playthrough on the characters, but right now I'm playing through the agent on a live server, and I'm enjoying that one quite a bit. Alex Freed did a heck of a good job with that. But the warrior will always be my main.
I'm currently playing through the agent right now as well with my Chiss.
Oh, excellent! Mine's a Chiss as well.
It's a lot of fun. That voice is just really fun. I know it's. Are you going a good agent or a bad agent or in the middle?
I'm pretty gray. I'm
gray in the middle too. Though sometimes it's like, I either do be a terrible person or way too good of a person.
Yeah, ugh. Yeah. I like a Chiss for the agent because that sort of wry, dry voice really fits it.
I agree. That voice is probably the best part of the agent for me.
Yeah, I really like that actor quite a bit.
So as a writer, do they encourage you guys to play through the game so you can see how your different things work, or do you just all play it as fans?
I do both. I mean, yeah, we do definitely play the game on a regular basis, so that we remember what it is that we're doing. And like I said, when I was first hired on, part of the job was to play a bunch of the classes and experience a lot of the stories, which was pretty cool. And they definitely encourage us to keep on playing. And sometimes even on weekends, I find myself up on the server, and I have a pretty good time on the GTN actually. Pretty good with selling crafting materials.
And avoiding the chat, I'm assuming, since most of those chats are very unhelpful. I just want to troll people.
It can be entertaining. I actually, now that for a while I was doing all the GTN stuff on my ship, which was really lonely actually. You don't get a lot in the chat window. Every once in a while somebody accidentally types something in chat, which is always funny. But now I'm actually I've got all the stuff set up in my Drum and Cost stronghold. So I'm getting the Drum and Cost chat, which is an interesting cross section of people with strongholds and newer players, which is I kind of enjoy it.
So we're going to switch gears for a little bit because we have questions about your time working with comics.
Sure.
One actually comes from my co-host who couldn't be here because it's the middle of the day and he doesn't work at night like I do, so we don't always mix. But he wants to know, since you got to write for DC, Marvel, IDW, and Star Wars, what's the similarities between writing for the different companies, and what are the differences between them, since not many people have written for everything?
Well, every publisher is a little different. Every universe has a sort of a different makeup. The work I did for Marvel Comics, which is who I worked for the most, I grew up on that stuff, and so it was a real sort of easy fit, and I found that they were very hands-off with me, and they had a sense that I knew what I wanted to do there, and they just kind of let me do it. Working in the DC universe was a lot more work for me because I didn't grow up on Superman and Batman and all that kind of stuff. But I got to work with people who were very well versed in those things and helped me out. The last thing I would want to do, because I'm a passionate fan myself, the last thing I would want to do is to be ignorant of things that other people are passionate about. And I wouldn't want to just come in and just start doing my own thing and find out that I'm, conflicting with years and years of continuity just for the sake of stroking my own ego. So that was a different kind of situation there where I had to depend more on others. SWTOR is kind of a mix of those because just within our game alone, when you think about how many hours of story exist in this game, that's quite a lot to experience. And so I do lean on Charles and Hall quite a bit, as they know quite a bit, obviously, because they wrote it and they've been here for many years, and I've only been here for a couple. So I do lean on them quite a bit, but I'm also pretty familiar with the Star Wars universe in general, and familiar with this era through KOTOR. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but the nice thing is that, I've got somebody at the next desk over that I can ask a question every time I have one, and they have a good answer for me.
So you got to write for Teen Titans, which we actually have friends of the show who are working on a web series called Teen Titans Project. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but the Teen Titans Project, which just launched an episode a little while ago, and we know Teen Titans Go came back last year, and another live-action one apparently is happening on TNT, so I hear. So the question what these people want to know is, first of all, would you ever want to return to writing Teen Titans? And second of all, what is it about Teen Titans that keeps on drawing people back to it?
Would I want to go back and write more Teen Titans? Yes, because I miss some of those characters. I especially miss Kid Devil and Ravager. And Wonder Girl, she was pretty great too. I really enjoyed writing those characters. Blue Beetle as well. I'm probably going to end up listing all of them because I really did like writing them. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind going back and writing them someday. Although since when I wrote them, DC had a relaunch of their entire universe, and so now they're maybe not the same characters, and I'm not up on that, so I would have to get up to date on what the characters were doing. As in terms of why people keep coming back to them, I can only speak for myself. As I said, I wasn't a DC fan growing up, but one of the most interesting things to me always when I was going to the newsstands back in the 80s was the covers of those Teen Titans books, and I would open them up and I would flip through them, and it was all very alien and strange, and the only thing I really recognized from them all was Robin, and I found that really exciting, but it was also really intimidating to me because I just I felt like it was beyond my depth because I was mostly just a Spider-Man fanboy and didn't understand what was going on with these books. And I think that what Marv Wolfman and George Perez did in that run in the 80s really defined them for a very long time, and defined them in such a great way that you could have interpretations as different as what the comic books were when I took over from Jeff Johns versus Teen Titans Go, which was obviously a very kid-friendly, all ages, a little more goofy sort of thing. And then, I suppose whatever they do with Titans on TNT is going to be very different from that as well. And I think that's true for anything. I think that's true for Star Wars as well. When you create something that can have a lot of interpretations to it, you've done yourself and fandom a service.
So you said you weren't a huge DC fan growing up. Were you at least a big enough a fan to know that stepping in for Geoff Johns is really intimidating?
Yeah, by then I did. I mean, I'd been writing comics for quite a while, and I knew Jeff somewhat in passing, at conventions and stuff. And that was one of the couple times that I had to replace a really popular writer, at the top of their game, and it was pretty intimidating. But the important thing for me was to not come in and just make my own stamp, put my own stamp on it. I think some writers like to do that. I felt like I should try to transition into what I do, and I think I was successful at that. The place where I wasn't so successful at that was Birds of Prey. I took over for Gail Simone, who's wildly popular, a great writer, and I just don't think I was a good fit for that. But yeah, taking over for Jeff Johns is not something I would look forward to doing again.
So as a freelance writer for comics, how were you able to choose your projects? Did some of them you actually made yourself and you sent them in, or they commissioned them? How did you decide, or they decide, what you got to work on as a freelancer? Yeah,
sometimes it was things that I pitched, and sometimes it was things that they pitched to me that they felt I would be right for. For example, the first two series I did for Marvel were called Sentinel and Inhumans, and both of those, they came to me and they said that we'd like you to pitch this series. We're going to have other writers pitch it, but we'd like you to pitch it as well. And whichever pitch we like best, we'll hire you. And so those were what we call bake-offs. And so I put my pitches together, and they deemed them the preferable ones for them. So some work that way, and then others work. They just come to me and they say, we want you to write this. We're not even thinking of anybody else, and then you have a little bit more carte blanche to do what you want to do, as was the case with Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane, which was a teen romance comic that starred Mary Jane Watson, and Spider-Man and Peter Parker were supporting characters in the cast. And that was a lot of fun to do that way. But then sometimes it was, me just coming to them and saying, well, I have an idea for a series. And that was the case with Young Allies, which was the last series I did for Marvel, which was kind of a new interpretation of the old World War II team that was led by Captain America sidekick Bucky. And so I did a version that was, more of a modern take on what's an American and what's a young superhero in the Marvel Universe in this day and age. So it's, a bit of everything.
So this is the last fan question, and then we'll begin wrapping this up.
Sure.
So one of the listeners wants to know, you worked on Inhumans, and you've worked on a lot of other Marvel projects, but none of them have really been the ones that have been adapted to the big screen. And Inhumans is supposedly one of the upcoming ones. Are you excited to see something that you worked on the big screen and maybe see some of your contributions shown up there?
I think that would be fantastic. I just a couple weeks ago, I worked with quite a lot with this artist named Mike Norton, and we co-created a character together for Marvel called Gravity, and he had a miniseries back in 2005, and he's been popping around since then, and we got to use him again later on, and a couple weeks ago, somebody sent us a screenshot. Gravity had shown up just like a tiny little cameo, no lines, in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and we just, we flipped our lids. We thought it was the greatest thing. So yeah, I mean, if something showed up in one of the movies, I'd be over the moon. Yeah, but we'll see. I think with Inhumans, they probably have plans that have more to do with like the more recent interpretation.
Well, possibly. Well, didn't you wrote it in the 2000s, right? Like 2000.
Yeah, 2003. I think. Yeah.
That's not that far.
No, it's not that far back. But I think like they've got kind of an entirely new take on it, and I think that's kind of where they're. I mean, I'm just guessing anyway. I mean, I don't really know because I don't. I wasn't in on that stuff when I was working for them. I'm certainly not now. But my speculation would be they've got a new series now, and I think they're going to try to take that as the sort of stepping, like that's almost like a pitch probably for what they want to do with it as a movie.
Okay. We actually just got one last fan question that just got sent to me on Twitter.
Cool.
The question is, you've worked on a lot of existing series, and you've done a lot of original stuff. Which did you prefer, working on existing series or that have characters or creating original characters, original content for comic books?
I like slightly edged out is creating your own stuff. I mean, when I started writing comics, it was a series called The Waiting Place, and that's what IDW recently reprinted. And that was a teen drama, it was a book about kids growing up in a dead-end Midwestern town. And it was all mine, all my characters. Obviously, I brought in talented artists to work with me on it. But in terms of the story, that was all my deal. And there's something, rewarding in that. But there's also something rewarding in having a hardcover edition of Spider-Man comics that you wrote, especially, as somebody who grew up reading that stuff, to be part of that legacy. And the same thing with SWTOR. To be part of the KOTOR legacy, the Star Wars legacy in general, is a pretty big deal.
So I believe we've reached about the time we need to wrap up. So the last question we'd like to ask all our guests is, we're going to give you the soapbox so you can promote how people can contact you, any current projects you want to promote, anything you want to say to fans, to listeners. The soapbox is yours to toot your own horn.
Well, you can reach me on Twitter at the Shawn Mckeever. Kind of an arrogant handle if you ask me. You can find me at ShawnMcKeever.com. and you can find. You can't find me on the forums because I don't really post on there. But that's where you can find me in terms of unofficial tweets and things of that nature. And in terms of what I've got coming up, I mean, it's all SWTOR all the time right now, and I'm really excited for all of you to experience the next expansion. And I hope that you've checked out Forged Alliances, particularly the Imperial side, and get to see what all the craziness is about, and give you a glimpse of how much crazier it's about to get.
And we shall wait for the next expansion as we wait in our strongholds and just lurk.
Yeah. We'll try to go out into the planet, stretch it a little bit, and and enjoy the weather.
Yeah. So there's no future return as of right this second to comic books for the comic fans, right?
No, nothing to report on that end.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet.
Maybe Marvel will hire you to make Star Wars The Old Republic comics.
Yeah, maybe, now that they've got it.
They did just take over the license, right? They just took it over?
Yeah, they just took it over. And in fact, even their first collection of Darth Vader books has a Darth Vader story by Alex Freed, our former lead writer. So that's pretty cool. And
you've already worked with Marvel, so maybe they'll be like, we know you.
Hey, they've got my number.
Do you think it would be harder going from script format back to comic books now that you've gotten so used to writing scripts?
No, I don't think so. I think that I've done that long enough, and I know that language so well. It just sticks with you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, sir. This has been fantastic and very, very informative.
Oh, thanks, Jeremiah. It's my pleasure.
Glad we could finally make it work. And sorry about the confusing tweet earlier.
That's all right. No worries.
It worked out. See, it did happen.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.